Let's talk about something that, on the surface, sounds, well, pretty gross. Coating your floor with cow dung. But what if I told you this wasn't superstition at all? What if it was actually a brilliant piece of environmental engineering, perfected over thousands of years? Yeah, the real story here is going to surprise you.
I mean, it's a fair question, right? Your first reaction is probably, why would anyone do that? To our modern eyes, it just seems like the exact opposite of what you'd want in a clean home. But to get the real answer, we have to look past our own assumptions and find the hidden logic.
So to figure out the why, we've got to go way back to the beginning. And we're not starting with culture or religion. Nope, we're starting with the very specific, very real environmental challenges people were up against.
Okay, so put yourself there. You're living in a climate that's incredibly dry and dusty for months, but then it flips to these intense, wet monsoon seasons. Wood is really scarce and expensive, so your floor is just packed earth. What you desperately need is some kind of coating, something that will stop the dust, handle the moisture, be tough enough to live on, and easy to fix.
And it turns out the perfect material was literally all around them. The high fiber content in the dung, especially from grass-fed cows, meant that when it dried, it became incredibly hard without cracking. You mix that with a little earth, and bam, you've got a smooth, durable surface. And this is so important to get. This started as a practical, life-saving technology long before it had anything to do with religion.
So, we've established it's practical. But what about the whole hygiene question? This is where the hidden science behind this practice is just absolutely fascinating. Let's break down the actual, verifiable benefits.
This is where all of our modern assumptions get completely turned on their head. We see unhygienic, but the reality is that it's antibacterial. We think primitive, when it's actually insulating and incredibly insect repellent. These aren't just opinions, by the way. These are the observed scientific properties of the material.
So you should think of it as this amazing, all-in-one natural floor treatment. The dung creates an alkaline surface where bacteria just doesn't like to grow. As it dries, these tiny microcracks form that actually help pull moisture away from the floor, which is a game changer during the humid season. Plus, it's a known insect repellent, and of course, it completely seals the earth floor so you're not breathing in dust all day.
And you know what's really incredible? This knowledge wasn't figured out in some high-tech lab. This was wisdom built up over thousands of years of trial and error. Generation after generation simply observed what worked, tweaking and refining the process until it was perfectly suited for their environment.
Okay, so if the practice is so logical and, scientifically sound, where does the whole idea of the sacred cow in Hinduism come from? You'd think the religion created the practice, right? Well, it turns out the evidence points in the exact opposite direction.
It seems like we've had the story backwards this whole time. Step 1, the cow was an essential piece of technology. It gave you flooring, fuel for your fire, fertilizer for your crops, and labor in the fields. It was absolutely indispensable for survival. Step 2, because the cow was so critical, protecting it became a top cultural priority. That value, that need to protect this resource, was eventually coded right into religious belief. The utility came first, the sacredness followed to protect it. And to make all this work, you had to have a totally different way of thinking about cleanliness. It wasn't about seeing dung as some unclean waste you had to get rid of. No, it was seen as part of a natural cycle, a kind of circulating purity. It connected the home, the animal, and the earth in this sustainable, incredibly useful loop. It's a worldview built on working with nature, not separating yourself from it.
So you have this incredibly rational, sustainable system that's been working for centuries. But then, the modern world shows up. And suddenly, this brilliant solution gets completely reframed as a problem.
Now here's the thing. The cow dung floor didn't disappear because it was proven wrong or because it stopped working. It faded away because the world around it changed. New materials like cement and tiles showed up. As people moved to cities, they didn't have access to cows anymore. And a new, very Western idea of hygiene, one focused on sterile, shiny surfaces, started to take over.
And with that big cultural shift, something really sad happened. What was once a source of pride, a sign of a well-managed and self-sufficient home, was suddenly turned into a source of shame. The practice became a social marker for being poor, for being rural, for being backward.
And that stigma had a real human cost. It was the rural communities, and especially the women who held this traditional knowledge, who were suddenly looked down upon. The practice was wrongly tied to lower castes, reinforcing all these harmful stereotypes about being unclean. And in the end, free, sustainable, and effective technology was lost, and the very people who relied on it were shamed for it.
So when you look at all of it, the science, the culture, the decline, what's the ultimate lesson here? What's the big takeaway from the story of the cow-dung floor?
It's really this. Whenever we come across a custom that just seems bizarre or makes no sense to us, it's often just a rational solution to a problem we don't have. We're judging it from our context, and we completely forget that it was born in a different one, where it made perfect logical sense.
And maybe that's the final thought to leave you with. Real understanding isn't about agreeing with the practice or judging it. It's about having the curiosity to trace it all the way back to its roots, to see that hidden logic, and to understand why, for a certain group of people, in a specific time and place, it was the absolute perfect solution.